Today, I'd like to talk about cake mix, which is not the latest, not the greatest, but perhaps the most sad of the shrinkflation chronicles that have been happening for a long time. Cake mixes have not been immune to this for many years, but it's the more recent shrinkage that throws me off, especially this one. And my camera's stuck with lighting, but let me put this up here so you can kind of see the difference there of Dolly Parton's cake, which I will now show you on here where it'll be a lot easier to see. So we have Dolly Parton, who is, universally loved. That's, I don't think that's just my opinion. I think that's generally the opinion of everybody, that nobody has a problem with Dolly Parton. Everybody's like, oh, Dolly Parton, she's great, country singer, philanthropist, blah, blah, blah. I don't follow Dolly Parton, but anytime I hear about her, I'm like, oh yeah, Dolly Parton, great. I think that's most people's view of Dolly Parton. And the cake mix, this specific cake mix came out from Duncan Hines in 2022. So this was post-COVID that they first released the Dolly Parton mix. It's only been 2 years, and they have already shrunk it a pretty significant amount. 2.75 ounces, from 18 ounces to 15.25 is very significant. And this issue affects more than just the cake mix itself. As somebody, the reason I wanted to make this video personally is when I saw this Dolly Parton mix, it hurt me to know that Dolly was getting her name thrown in the mud, essentially. I mean, she sold her name to Duncan Hines, so I guess it's on her, but I don't think she follows the cake business or knows or probably really cares. But I think if this issue came up to her, she would probably be on my side on this one. That's my guess. But I don't think it really matters to her in the long grand scheme of things, because she's got like a million businesses, whatever. But it sucks that they're using her name in particular to shrinkflate, and especially since the packaging is noticeably worse. Like, I don't know if you've been looking at it while I've been talking, but look at the actual cake box. The one on the right, the original one, looks pretty good. This one looks like a fake cake. Like, the frosting is a little too thick and like clay-like. It doesn't really look viscous, and the cake looks more like a slab than a cake, which is just odd. I mean, the box looks significantly worse. They took it off the pink plate. I don't know why they did that. That was a good idea. It just looks worse in every way, and instead of being perfectly moist, it's down home quality with perfectly moist up here. They made some slight changes for some reason, but even those slight changes seem like bad changes from a graphic design perspective, in my opinion. Either way, it sucks, but the deeper issue with this is not just that you'll have a smaller cake, which personally affects me because I am a box cake kind of guy. My family has always been a box cake people. We're not, particularly adept chefs, cooks, bakers, whatever. We would do box cakes when we couldn't afford a regular cake. We would make box cakes, and that happened a lot when I was a kid growing up. And recently, I've been getting back into box cakes. My dad's been making box cakes, and they've been pretty good. But now, it's ruined kind of the memory in a sense. And the reason why is not even necessarily personal to me, but there's many recipes that I have had from other people, I don't know any of them, that rely on cake mix as a base of the recipe, as in homemade recipes for other, like cookies, bigger cakes, all kinds of baked goods, all kinds of brownies, whatever, utilize the cake mix itself as an ingredient. Or there'll be recipes for big cakes that will utilize, hey, you need 4 boxes of cake mix. And the way that these are shrinkflated directly affects those recipes and completely ruins them. And it not only ruins them, it kind of ruins the cake itself a little bit as well, because they didn't change the actual ratio of items that you use in this Dolly Parton cake. You still use the same amount of eggs and butter. So it just ends up being more runny and less good. I mean, I guess this is a good example of what the cake is going to look like, because it is going to not be the fluffy cake you want. The 18 ounce or more specifically, what most cakes are, 18.25 ounce, or what they used to be, I should say. There's a lot of recipes built around the standard size of 18.25 ounces, and 18 ounces would fit that just fine. But 15.25 just, it completely ruins it. You know, baking, as they say, is a science. There is ratios that you need to follow that they just completely throw off by cutting out 2.75 ounces in this mix without actually changing any of the ingredients that you yourself are adding as a customer to make up for that difference. Because they can't really. I mean, what can you do? They can't tell you to use a half an egg or 3/4 of an egg. It's just, you know, BS to save, like, I don't know, how much money do you think they save cutting down a cake mix by 2.75 ounces? I'd be very curious how much money they actually save per box on flour and sugar, essentially. Like, it can't be more than a nickel. Like, is this like 5 cents a box? I mean, I know that adds up over time. Let's say they sell a couple million, you know, they're making some money there. But it's ridiculous. I mean, we've crossed the point. You know, it was already bad enough. You know, other cakes have done this. This is not just Dolly, and other cakes are even worse. Betty Crocker now is in fact 13.25 ounces. All of their cakes are 13.25 ounces. That was a recent change from 15, which is what this is, 15.25. They went from 18.25 to 15.25 to 13.25 in the matter of less than a decade, I would say. And here is a little bit of your evidence for this, if I can find the thing. Oops, I might have mixed up my links, but there is I'm going to find it. I'll be back in a second with a link that shows the older 18.25 cake mixes. But my point is, they were 18.25, then they went to 15.25 not too long ago. Duncan Hines is still 15.25. Something has changed in the last week. You can see it on all these Reddit posts. People are saying, what the hell? These boxes no longer make 2 dozen cupcakes. It's another funny thing. You'll see on a box that the cupcake instructions make 20 cupcakes instead of 24, which is ridiculous. It's insane. You can't make 2 full, like, round cakes and stack them up to make 1 cake because the mix is just not enough. And as this guy says, if you use a recipe calling for 1 box, it's just not going to work at all. It's so, like, big of a deal that there are multiple things. I just picked this one because this was the first one that came up on Google with 208 comments. It's been around forever, since October 2012, of how to get up to 18.25 ounce on your cake mix to get to your size that you need. And here we go. Here's a Pillsbury. This is good for me. Here's a Duncan Hines and a Betty Crocker that are 15.25 ounces, showing that they were, in fact, 15.25 ounces until not too long ago. Now we're down to 13.25, and we got this whole blog this person's making, and there really isn't any fix, because when you scroll through all this crap, because it's a blog, there has to be a million paragraphs. Here's the good news. It's pretty easy to fix. Here's how you fix it. You add more cake mix or some flour. And I don't think adding 5 ounces of flour is really going to necessarily come out with a good cake. And she's got a whole formula of how to replicate the right cake mix batter ratio to doctor up your cakes and all that good stuff, which is sad. I mean, the fact that this exists is horrible. To save Duncan Hines and Pillsbury Better Crocker, 5 cents a box, you have to completely write new recipes. You have to change all of your old recipes. And any recipe you had from 50 years ago is going to not work. If it calls for a box of cake mix, you're going to have to change it up. It's not going to be the same. It's just all bad. Like, there's no upside to this for the consumer, and it's so blatantly noticeable if you are a consumer of the product. That's the thing. Many people don't buy box cakes, so they'll never know or care. Most people, including myself, I don't make too many box cakes, but again, I make them sometimes. I just think that as a market, it's mostly going to be, I guess, enthusiasts who buy cake mix. I don't know. I think the most people who buy cake mix are probably people who are broke and need a birthday cake or a cake for something, like me. Or B, people who enjoy making their own cakes, or C, people who enjoy using the cake mix to make their own recipes. And all 3 of those categories are screwed by this change. You get less And not only does it make the recipe worse, it also screws the ratios to make 20 cupcakes instead of 24, or a weirdly sized cake where the frosting doesn't quite match. But I mean, the frosting, I can't even get into this already. The frosting is already not enough, and they shrink that as well. But let's not get into that too much. This is about cake mix. I wanted to keep this video fairly short, so hopefully it is. I'm not going to even look that up, but if you want to look it up, look up cake mix sizes. You'll find many pictures of 18.25 ounce cake mix boxes, including this 18 ounce Dolly Parton box, which was on the shelf just a couple weeks ago, which is now 15.25, or your friends of mine at Betty Crocker, who are even worse and have a 13.25 ounce cake mix that they charge the same price, if not more, for. That's the important thing here. They didn't like lower the price to go along with it. That's the biggest issue. That's the number one thing I want to get across. Don't ever believe any company when they say anything to you. The proof is always in the numbers. Look at what's on the shelves. Even if Duncan Hines, I mean, they're not going to, but let's say somehow this actually affects their business, because this is actually pretty fucked up. And they go back to at least 15.25 ounces, let's say, or they put the they put the Dolly Parton back up because it's Dolly Parton and maybe she gets word of it or something like that. I guarantee it will only be temporary, number one, and number two, they're not going to ever lower the price. In fact, they will raise it probably or keep it the same. That's what that's really the key concept of shrinkflation that makes it insidious. Is even when they're caught and they say that they're going to make it up, it's always just them going back to what it was, or throwing you a bone temporarily, but the change still happens. You know what I'm saying? They still go through with it. They just, if they get caught, they give you a little extra time to enjoy what was already established as what a cake mix should be. They say, oh, okay, we'll go back to that for a year, 6 months, and then quietly do it again. And hopefully this time nobody will find out. That's the goal of shrinkflation. And really, in my mind, the goal as a consumer should be, anytime you see shrinkflation, call it out. And if a company catches on to it, like Frito-Lay recently catching on to their thing and saying, oh, we're going to put 20% extra chips in some bags in some select markets to fight shrinkflation because our sales are down a little bit. That is BS. The point is they're going to put bonus on a bag for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, and people will be like, okay, I guess it's back to what it used to be. Then they'll take that bonus away and again quietly try to do it again. It's just a repeating cycle, and they'll keep doing it until consumers find an equilibrium. That's what I'm hoping, and the only way I see to do that is to just, when you call out the shrinkflation and they come back and say some BS like Frito-Lay did with the 20% extra in some bags, just still continue to call it out and not buy it, which is why I'm doing this cake mix thing. I've been kind of enjoying the cake mixes recently, but I'm done with these cake mixes. I don't know if there actually is a third-party option. That's the other bad thing about groceries, of course. Is there even another option to buy a cake mix that isn't, that is still 18.25 ounces, that isn't made by one of like 5 companies that own everything? Probably not. In fact, the only way I could probably buy a real cake mix that's not like owned by a crazy company is to spend more money than I have for a cake mix. So I guess I'm out of the cake mix business for a while. Maybe I might still buy one for a birthday again, because it's still the cheapest way to make a cake. I mean, buying a cake is expensive, but it sucks. So I guess I'm just going to stop. I've been doing cakes every once a month, basically. My dad's been buying cakes and making them for fun, but it's ruined that. The spirit is out of it. It used to be like, oh, what cake mix can we try this week? This will be fun. But then when you go back and see that you're paying the same amount for less, it just instantly ruins any kind of joy from actually baking the cake. In fact, I don't know, maybe he'll start making real cakes. I doubt it because that's a lot of extra work. Even I don't want to do that. And like I understand, like there's a market for cake mixes, but they're screwing themselves with this. Like everything else, like fast food, the race to the bottom continues, and they're going to continue doing it. Hopefully, a little pushback will come against this, but it won't because it went from 18.25 to 15.25, and I didn't even notice, of course. And nobody really noticed except a couple people on Reddit who bake. That's the insidious part of it. Is you might buy a cake mix, and if you have not seen this video or you don't very, very, very closely follow certain like niche subreddits or news feeds or Substacks or whatever, you'll never know. You might just be like, oh, I'm gonna buy a cake mix because I used to like buying, making cake mixes when I was a kid. You're gonna get it. It's gonna be a shitty small cake that's way worse than you remember and way less than you remember, and it's gonna suck. That's what's gonna happen for most people, and for everybody else, they're gonna have to just grin and bear it and keep buying the cake mix if they want to keep making cakes because there really isn't an alternative on the market because groceries are crazy and food is a crazy business, as I've said, and very much owned by mega corporations that can basically do what they want, and most people will never call them out on it because, again, in most people's minds it's not that big of an issue. It's not a number one priority, which is why I'm here making YouTube videos. So hopefully somebody gets a little bit informed by this and maybe is mad and maybe sees, like me, Dolly Parton's name being dug into the dirt, spit on, kicked by Duncan Hines, and feels like talking about it, which is all I want. I just complain more. That's my life advice. As much as I do agree with the positive mental attitude and everything, that's good. You should be positive with people. Be positive in your daily life and all that good stuff. Be positive to yourself. Be nice to yourself. Be nice to your friends. Be nice to your family and all that. Be nice to people at stores. Be nice to the workers at Walmart. Be nice to the workers at Betty Crocker or whatever. If you know them, which you wouldn't. But my point is, you should be nice and positive in all aspects of your life. But when it comes to a company, a corporation, a business apparatus, fuck them. That's the ideal. That's not the ideal. I mean, it is the ideal, but that's really the way it should be. They're not your friend. You're not their friend. Their entire goal is to pick your pocket of as much money as possible. They want to just run everybody's pockets without anybody, blinking an eye. And your job is to blink as a consumer and say, what the fuck is going on, and demand better. That's all. So with that, I'll see you all next time.